Hello guys and welcome to the latest MSC Performance Podcast with me, Mark Coulson, and Sonia Kluckova. Hope you're all doing really well. We're really excited about today's podcast. The title is, Does Endurance Training Affect Your Strength Gains? So really interesting topic today. I've got a variety of things to get through. First of all, how are we doing, Sonia?
Hi everyone, I'm doing very well and hope everyone else is doing the same. I'm really excited for this podcast. It's a great topic to discuss. I think very accurate as well. So can't wait to go through.
Yeah, there's always a lot of confusion, isn't there? You get a lot of guys who get a bit confused between, do I want to be building loads of weight and going heavy, or do I need to be working on more my cardio, conditioning, more endurance work? And ultimately, as strength conditioning coaches, the clue's in the name, really. So it's all about strength and conditioning, and you can develop both qualities extremely well to become the best all-round athlete that you possibly can. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can manage that. So we're going to be talking a little bit about concurrent training. So basically, the idea of developing strength qualities and endurance qualities in the same program. This might be on the same day. This might be on separate days. Do we do it at the end of a session? Do we do it on separate sessions? What should the intensity of my endurance training be? So we're going to be referring to endurance training. When we refer to that today, we're talking about conditioning, really. So we're talking about, Metcon, we're talking about conditioning. We're talking about anything that's kind of cardiovascular, if you will. We don't like to use, the term cardio work, generally, because even when we're doing strength training, we're working our cardiovascular system. So we'll refer to it today as endurance training. So as I say, do you add 10 minutes on at the end of your strength session? Do you do it before? Do you do it after? Separate days? Do you do a block of strength and a block of conditioning? That's pretty obvious for most people that probably that's not the right way to go. So we're going to have a little discussion about that today, and we're going to hit all different ability levels. So we're going to talk about beginners and intermediates and what they should be doing, and then we're going to be talking about advanced guys as well, because as you get more advanced, things do change a little bit in regards to how you should get that endurance work in, that cardiovascular work in. Okay, so we'll start off with the sort of idea around concurrent training. So, as I said, most people are going to want to develop strength qualities and conditioning qualities, and we obviously highly encourage that. At MSC, we have the Barbell Club, which has a big focus around strength training, and then we have our Metcon session, which is a big focus around, obviously, endurance and conditioning work. We run those programs together, so it is technically a concurrent approach. This is nothing new. Concurrent training's been around, since the 1930s, 1940s. So nothing new here, but how do we balance that, and how do we go about it the right way? Okay, so as I said, there is things to take into consideration. Your total volume needs to be considered alongside your lifestyle. So we've done a couple of podcasts on this lately where we've talked a lot about making sure that you're doing the right amount of training in the gym and outside of the gym that is sustainable, so that you can be consistent and therefore get results. So if you're a chief executive of a company, or you're a stay-at-home mum or dad who run their own business and you're extremely busy, then aiming to come to the gym 7 times a week probably isn't the wisest idea. You might be able to do that for a week, but all of a sudden your food's poor, your sleep's poor, you're having stress from other factors outside of the gym because you haven't got time, and therefore you might have you might smash a week or two in the gym, and then ultimately you're going to fall away, and your progress is going to stop because you're going to go from 7 sessions to 0. So it is very much about looking at the holistic approach of how much gym, how much outside the gym, how does that affect my work? How does that affect my life at home? And it's finding the right balance. Okay, that's really, really key. And we've talked a lot about that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that today. But what we are going to talk about is, as I say, when can we do this? Is it in the same session, separate session, etc., etc. So the answer is, if we start off with a beginner, for example, so someone who's quite new to strength training, all right? So someone who's done, a bit of cardio before, they've maybe tried the gym, but they've never put anything consistently together. So they're starting to get into a strength training program. So if you're in that bracket, if you're a beginner or even early intermediate, okay, the answer is it doesn't actually really matter too much where you put that conditioning in to your program. Okay, so what we do with the barbell club is we microdose it. So during the 3 barbell club sessions you're doing, so you're doing 3 strength sessions a week, what we will do is we'll get the guys doing literally 5 minutes to 10 minutes of conditioning at the end of those sessions. Okay, so it's a quick blast. There's a little bit of high intensity in there because it's a short period of time, and it's getting the guys used to working, a little bit of anaerobic work, a little bit of high intensity stuff. Then we also have Metcon sessions on separate days. Now, some of these sessions are a bit more high intensity, some of them are low intensity and aerobic. Now, if you're a beginner, this isn't something that you massively need to overthink. What you need to be doing is making sure you are doing a little bit of strength and a little bit of conditioning at the same time. Okay, now the benefits of this are, pretty obvious. Okay, we want to get stronger. We don't want to use this podcast to discuss the benefits of strength training, but they're all pretty apparent. And if you're not sure, listen to some of our other podcasts. But obviously, we want to improve our strength and build stronger muscles and be able to lift more weight. That will carry over really well to the conditioning side of things. So we can apply more force through the floor when we're running, when we're jogging, when we're sprinting. If we're using any resistance in our conditioning sessions, we can push a heavier sled, we can push a lighter sled faster. So the strength really carries over nicely and obviously makes us more robust as well for higher intensity conditioning work. But it's also really important to do the conditioning as well, because that will carry over nicely to the strength work. Because what we're doing there is we're building a bigger engine. Okay, so we're improving the ability and the quality in which our heart and lungs can work. We're building up work capacity, we're building up an aerobic base, we're getting used to anaerobic stuff where the heart's jumping up and jumping down really quickly, and that carries over really well to your strength training because it gives you a bigger base of endurance, so you can handle a lot more volume, generally speaking. Okay, so that's the kind of benefit of doing both of them. So in terms of when to do it, as we said, you can add this on at the end of the session, okay, for 10 minutes, little bits of micro dosing we like to do to get the guys used to it. And then, for example, if our barbell club guys want to do an additional Metcon session on top of that, or they want to do some running, or they want to do some aerobic work, then that can be added on as well, maybe as a 4th session or a 3rd session or a 5th session. Again, that depends on what the lifestyle's like and what they can fit in.
I would probably just add to this, great beginning, that
thanks, Bab.
That I would suggest monitor it, observe how you're coping with it, because because usually people ask us. So I wouldn't say there's no one answer to every single of them, but again, we advise you to try a couple, maybe 1 or 2, and see how you react to it, because that genuinely just you will see how you feel about it, because going from doing nothing into doing 3 strength sessions a week is enough already. 1 Metcon on top of it would be great. Maybe if you cope with 2, even better, but you have to try it yourself, because you might feel good for a week or 2, but actually then it may take a bit more demand. You will feel probably a bit more tired through the week. But that's again that initial start when you feel exhausted and tired. Probably when you do this conditioning in the morning, I would say through the day you feel way more tired. Don't let these things put you off, because that's kind of natural impact of when you add in this additional stress. So see how you're coping with that and adjust accordingly, because if you're going to try to do 3 strength sessions a week and on top of it the rest 3 or 4 days of the week doing conditioning, that might hit you hard. So again, just observe how you coping it with it yourself. Might be different for your partner, might be different for your friend. So again, individual approach would be the best probably to do.
Yeah, finding the right balance is absolutely key, and it is very individual, as you say. I think the kind of takeaway is that doing cardio conditioning alongside your strength work is not going to affect your strength. What you need to be careful of is the overall volume of training that you're doing. So as Sonia says, like if you're, with the barbell club, we do 3 strength sessions a week, and generally speaking, there's a bit of supersetting in between that as well. There's quite a bit of moving around. You're doing some decent volume, so you're actually hitting like a reasonable aerobic base throughout that whole session anyway, plus a little bit of high intensity for the last 5 or 10 minutes with the watt bike or the echo bike or the ski erg or whatever it is, may well be enough. And then as Sonia says, like if you want to try a Metcon on top of that, then that's absolutely fine. And if you feel good from that and you can handle that, then that's absolutely fine. And if you can handle that total volume, like you said, it's not going to have a direct adverse effect on the strength training. So you can develop both. Okay. The reason being, like if you're a beginner, then as long as you're consistent and you're sustainable with your training, then you actually need quite a minimal dose with your strength training to improve. So what we mean by that is, like if you're coming in and you're doing very sort of low to moderate volume, very low to moderate intensity, and what we mean by that is you're not going 100% flat out, you're not doing 1 rep maxes, you're lifting well within your capabilities. Basically you might be doing 5 RPE, 6 RPE, 7 RPE, you're not talking 9s and 10s initially to get those strength improvements. So because you're working at quite a low capacity still, and it's new, so it's a new stress, it's a new stimulus on the body, and therefore it's quite easy to get an adaptation. What we're saying is there is room for a little bit of conditioning alongside that won't affect your gains. And then to just roll on from what Sonia was saying, which is absolutely correct about kind of just managing that overall program, we perhaps have a little think about the intensity of the endurance work that we're doing, the conditioning work that we're doing. So if you are a complete beginner with no base of conditioning at all, what you might do is we would say, right, come in and do you 3 strength sessions a week, and that's more than enough in the gym. And what I want you to do outside of the gym is, from your endurance cardio position, you want to just get your step count up. Okay, so you want to do more walking, so we maybe give you a step count. So we'd be talking very low level aerobic work that is basic, but just getting the heart rate up a little bit over long periods of time, building up a bit of a cardio base, building up, burning a lot of calories, etc., because that's what we call kind of low cost conditioning. It doesn't really bite into your fatigue levels or your nervous system. Just gradually getting your steps up is a very easy way to get in some extra cardio on top of your strength training.
This would be a great way how to kind of start building up that engine. But definitely we're not saying that you should wait until you're ready or something like that. Like, no, for now, just do strength. So as Mark said, like either that would be like, okay, if you've tried a Metcon or a conditioning session and you don't have the time to do that, or it's taxing on your body a lot, okay, we start with this, like managing your step count, are you having your daily walk, etc. But there's definitely room for both. You just need the right advice and right management of programming, and that's basically why we're here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So as I said, as Sonia's just said, there is room for both, and we highly encourage both, and we need to do both really. It's just finding the right level. If your strength's your bread and butter and coming in and hitting at least a couple of strength sessions a week, then we can almost manage the conditioning side of it around that. So as we've kind of highlighted, that might be a Metcon session, that might be some, high intensity anaerobic work, that might be some longer aerobic work, but in the gym with lots of, push, pull, carry, sledge work, kettlebell work, etc. Or it might be as simple as getting your step count up. Or it might be as simple as, going out for a run or going out on the bike, once a week or twice a week, but doing low level. But Sonia's hit the nail on the head there. Just make sure you get good advice. And that's where, without blowing our own trumpets too much, is where, we I think we do a really good job here at MSC is that looking over that whole holistic view of your training and getting to know the individual. So we'll have the barbell club, but it's like, right, well, you might have, person A who, loves getting out on the bike, on a Saturday and Sunday.
Or someone who works in hospitality, let's say, like they spend all day on their feet and it's just, they're shattered.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah. And
really considering the factors outside the gym as well. And I think that kind of describes S&C in a nutshell, that it's not just about how, like, you coach a lift or how you teach someone to perform, but how you actually manage their overall training with everything outside the weight room as well. So I think this is going to be really interesting when we're now talking about the beginner, and then we're going to kind of move to the other levels, because obviously, let's say Mark is a field athlete, plays rugby. I train often as well. So maybe you're wondering how we kind of managing this, and this will be good maybe to discuss if you're interested. And if you're not, we're going to discuss these levels anyway. So anything to add to the beginner? I think summed it up.
No, I think just to very quickly round it up again, just going back to the timings of when to do it. Again, just a little bit of trial and error. So try and do 5-10 minutes at the end of a session. Try and do it on a separate day. But overall, it doesn't really matter as long as during the week you're getting in at some point. So just a little bit of trial and error. Like I said, some of our barbell club guys will like to do 1 or 2 metcons alongside that, and they like to come in 4 or 5 times a week. That's brilliant. If you're someone who can only come in twice a week, once a week, 3 times a week, then you might want to look at doing it in the same session and do it at the end of it. And what we're saying is that as a beginner, it doesn't really matter that much when you do it, because it is not going to have a knock-on effect on your strength training, as long as the overall picture isn't, we're doing too much or we're not consistent.
Yeah, if anything, at the beginning, it will probably do better, as you will start like building up the engine and then recovering better in between sessions with long-term effect.
Sure. So as we move on to more intermediate advanced, I think like intermediate is a real hard one, because you've got, beginners into early intermediate, and you've almost got that late intermediate into advanced. But if we just kind of refer to more advanced, I think that might be easier, because even with intermediate guys, like it really depends how you define someone as intermediate. But the research will show that it's actually very similar. Like intermediate guys will be seen as very similar to beginners. So again, like it's the same rules as the beginner, but you're maybe just being a bit smarter with the amount you're doing. You may be thinking about the intensity of those sessions as well. But let's kind of go sort of through to advanced guys here. And this is where we are, we won't quite go sport specific yet, but we'll just talk about advanced, people in the gym, people who've been training a long time. And this is where you do need to be a little bit careful, because with your strength training now, all of a sudden it's, we're talking a few years in, it's more difficult to get progress in strength training. Now, obviously you can continue to improve, but you have to start being a little bit smarter with your training, because it becomes harder to create new stresses and stimuluses, and therefore continue to get adaptations and become stronger. So we need to be a bit smarter about our training. We essentially need to push harder, certainly smarter, but harder in terms of, we're going to have to go through periods of higher RPE levels. We're going to have to push, heavier weights. We're going to be lifting heavier weights naturally than we were when we were a beginner. So the heavier the weights we're lifting, the more total volume we're accumulating, the tonnage that we're accumulating from a strength training point of view is going to have a knock-on effect on your fatigue levels, and is going to take longer to recover from. So if we go like, if I jump across now to talking about, very quickly an elite level power lifter or weightlifter, for example, then because they're lifting very, very heavy weights and the aim is to lift as heavy as they possibly can, the recovery between sessions becomes very important. And in terms of replenishment of CNS, in terms of, recovering the muscles from fatigue for the next session. So all of a sudden, if that guy's trying to fit in a high intensity conditioning session in between, their heavy lifting sessions, then that is going to cause obviously a big onset of fatigue, and therefore the next session, their strength gains will be affected. Okay. So the more advanced you get, the higher the chance of the conditioning, the cardio, the endurance, whatever you want to call it, of affecting your strength gains?
I think that, like, again, really depends on kind of the level you at, or what you want to achieve, because obviously if someone would like to just be like all around, fit athlete or train bit of both, maybe someone doesn't really care that much if he's not feeling that fresh, because he may just do another lifting session lighter. But for someone who's preparing for a competition, that would be definitely a thing. So obviously there's no much room for that high intensity session in between your recovery, and it's really important to monitor what you do on those recovery days, because obviously we can touch a little bit about like active recovery, but that all has to be controlled and managed. So let's say if I would be preparing for a competition, I probably just can't do what I want, even though I would feel like I have the energy, because it would have massive impact on that next session. And when you kind of follow in a structured program, the session should be done as you aiming for. So if you plan your RPs on, I don't know, session 3 being still high, you know that you need a certain level of recovery a couple of days before.
The higher the level we're at, the higher forces we're producing in the weight room, whether that's through the amount of weight we're lifting, the speed and power in which we're lifting, or the velocity we're producing in our power work and speed work. Okay, so the higher the recovery. So we need to be really careful. There's two main things we've got to consider is with the conditioning work is when. Okay, so when are we going to do this? And then the second question is intensity. So what intensity are we going to do this at? So there are two key questions that we need to answer, really. Okay. So in terms of, let's talk about intensity. So in terms of the intensity of the session, okay. Now, let's say, for example, we're someone who is really, really keen to get our deadlift up or to get our squat up. We'll verge into powerlifting and weightlifting shortly, but just someone generally who wants to really improve that squat, that bench, that deadlift. Okay, so let's say we've got a really, really heavy, session on the Monday in the gym. We've got a really, really heavy session on the Wednesday in the gym. Now we've got that Tuesday, which might be an off day or a light day. Okay. So what we don't want to be doing on that Tuesday is going and hitting a really hard anaerobic / lactate focused conditioning session, because that is going to have a knock-on effect and cause a lot of fatigue in time for the Wednesday session. You've had a hard Monday session. The Tuesday, you're absolutely beasting, your nervous system and your conditioning bases, your heart and lungs. And therefore, for the Wednesday, we're going to be coming in fatigued. And then obviously, that's going to have a real knock-on effect on the strength levels of that session. Okay, so what we might look at doing on that day, this is just an example, obviously, but what we might look at doing on that day is just going for a long walk. Okay, or what I know a lot of, or a few powerlifters that we work with will do is doing the conditioning during the week just isn't really feasible. Okay, especially not a hard conditioning session, and same with weightlifters as well. So what you might be doing is you might be saying, right, well, let's just keep a decent aerobic base up. Let's manage my weight, my body weight, which is obviously important in those sports, by just making sure my step count throughout the week is at a reasonable level. So I am active, I'm doing some, albeit very low, I'm still doing some aerobic work. And then you might say, right, okay, well, I've got a session, my last hardest session is on a Saturday, and then maybe a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday evening, possibly even a Sunday, you go for, a moderate level hike, let's say, for example, to get your conditioning level in. So if you're really focusing on that maximal strength end, then with your conditioning work, you probably want to be looking at a real low intensity. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't be doing any, but you would just be working aerobically, not doing massive amounts of anaerobic and high intensity work. There might still be a space for it, but it'd be very minimal dose. So for example, on a Saturday afternoon, you might double dip and come back in and do a quick, 10 to 20 minute high intensity. You're probably better off doing it after the session in that case. So it's really about finding those individual needs and where we're at. But like I said, for those high level kind of lifters who are really got a massive emphasis on maximal strength, then we do need to be careful and very minimal doses of high intensity work, if any. And if we are doing it, probably looking at kind of off season if we're a competitive lifter, but also making sure we are maintaining an aerobic base with basics like step counting, going out for a longer walk once a week, maybe a long cycle, but very low level, so that we can build an aerobic base. I think a lot of powerlifters and weightlifters don't actually do enough conditioning, and they'll neglect it completely. And you'll see in their program, they might have some volume work. They might have, 2 sets of 5 and then 2 sets of 10 back off or something like that. And they haven't got the engine and the capacity and the work capacity to be able to handle those sets. They need too long recovery in between sets. So the length of the session can be, far too long for what they need. And it has a real knock-on effect.
I think one key thing you said, and it's important to stress it again, is maybe what I see the issue with many people is that they don't know what is light conditioning and what's gonna have high impact on the CNS. So you might not even feel that fatigue or tired doing cardio, and you might feel you know what, I have space to push it, but you're actually not realizing that it's not maybe the mechanical stress on the body as much as on the central nervous system. So I think this is the key thing, that when they hit it wrong, that they just don't realize that even the body feels okay. It's the actual nervous systems, which you then can cope on the session too, for the heavy Wednesday session. So I think this is really important to understand that even though you don't feel that tired yourself, I think the nervous system has been crashed on that Monday session with the hard lift, and that's why you have to take the Tuesday off or doing something low. So maybe perhaps find out or get advice on what would be the light work, because you might see someone doing intervals on a bike. I don't know, working 20, 40, 10, 50, and they don't realize that this is high intensity work.
Sure.
I'm not sure if they work at that intensity, because that's obviously coming across with those issues when you're working hard and high intensity interval training, etc. But you probably don't want to do something like this. So I think what you said about probably do a steady walk or something like this would be a good option.
Yeah.
So just again, the management and realizing what's what and understanding the different ratios and intensities is crucial. And you learning this as you go in towards being at advanced level, perhaps.
Yeah. We'll go into field athletes in a minute, but I think to kind of just briefly recap on everything is that what we're saying is that everybody, or pretty much everybody, should be doing some form of conditioning, endurance training alongside the strength training. Hence the term strength conditioning. It's just really about identifying goals and primary goals and then working around those. So like we say, if we're talking about a top level powerlifter or weightlifter, then the goal is obviously achieving as much maximal strength as we possibly can in the competition lifts. The goal isn't to run a marathon. The goal isn't to be amazing at a Metcon. So the primary focus needs to be on that strength work. And because the strength work is going to be very, very hard, and it's going to be everything's dedicated around that, we just need to be very careful with dosing the conditioning in the right way, but not neglecting it completely, because keeping a good physique, good body weight is important. Building an aerobic engine is very important. Carry over to the sport, and with weightlifters especially.
So let's say in Ollie lifting on a competition, you've got 6 attempts, 3 attempts on each lift. So, and same with powerlifting. In powerlifting is a bit different. You kind of know when you're gonna go, whereas in weightlifting it changes a lot. So you might sometimes get 5 minutes in between your lifts, and sometimes maybe just a minute or 2. So this is where the fitness base kind of comes handy. So the fitter you are, the better you recover, and then obviously you can cope with this a bit better, which eventually will affect the performance you're still aiming for, which is max lift. the heaviest possible. But that's where the fitness side comes really, really beneficial and important. So definitely neither weightlifters or powerlifters should neglect the conditioning side, because if you don't have any fitness, you probably will struggle on your competition day.
Yeah, definitely. And it can be a long day as well. The competition can be a real long day sometimes as well, can't it? So just having a good aerobic base can just help you, last a full day. And also, even with, top level powerlifters, weightlifters, I'm sure, there's things outside of the gym that they like, nobody likes being unfit and, doing some low level. But that's, as I say, it's just making sure that doesn't interfere with the maximal strength work by doing some, like you say, your conditioning work might just be lower level. You might save some higher intensity stuff perhaps for the off season, which might be quite useful. But even during the main bit, and as you're on lead up to comp and maybe 8-12 weeks out, you might lower, even real minimal dose of aerobic work, but maybe just focus on your step count being okay during the week. The other end of the scale, you might have like endurance guys. So you might have guys who, are trying to do half marathons or Tough Mudders or whatever it might be, like ultra endurance events. So obviously the endurance work is going to be a lot higher. The conditioning work is going to be a lot higher, and it works the other way around. So we don't want to neglect the strength work completely. That's a tragic mistake that a lot of people make, to be honest with you. And then they get injured in the conditioning work because they've got no strength base, no robustness, to be able to withstand the forces that they're going to undertake. If you think about a marathon, for example, that's a hell of a lot of force that your body's undertaking to run 26 miles, and that's on the day. That's not talking about the hundreds of miles and thousands of miles that you'll be doing in the training lead up to it. So, imagine doing that with absolutely no strength base, which most, endurance, guys will do and neglect. Get in the gym, do your minimal dose strength training. So if a high level weightlifter might be training 6 sessions a week in the gym, a high level powerlifter might be, generally does a little bit less, maybe 4 or 5 sessions in a week, and doing fairly minimal conditioning. You'll be the other way around. You'll be doing lots and lots of conditioning, but it's essential, even more so this way around, that you do the minimal dose of strength work once or twice a week, so that you can build up enough strength, stability and robustness to absorb the high force impact of running a marathon or running fast or whatever it might be. Okay. And also the performance gains of being able to produce more muscular contractile force through the floor. Every step we take is going to make you a lot more efficient at running or cycling or rowing or whatever sort of endurance event we're talking about. Now, that isn't just professional endurance guys. That's like your everyday guys. Not everybody wants to be an absolute monster in the gym and lift really, really heavy weights. Okay. So, you might have, your sort of beginner intermediate who works in office all day, but just loves running. They want to compete in a half marathon, or maybe not even that. They just like going out for a run, 3-4 times a week, 5 times a week, whatever that is. But even then we would say, so important just to get a little bit of strength work in. So strength and conditioning, as I say, clues in the name, and just making sure that we are doing both. And obviously the level and the intensity and time in which you put into it is just very dependent on your goals. So I will go into field athlete chat now, if that's all right, Sonia. Yeah. So we'll just talk a little bit about kind of your field athletes, American football, rugby, football, tennis, cricket, whatever it is. So with these sports, you don't really have a choice. You have to be strong, you have to be powerful, and also you have to have a good conditioning base. Okay, so taking my sport of rugby, obviously I want to be very strong, I want to be very powerful, but I've got to get around the pitch for 80 minutes. Okay, a footballer needs to get around the pitch for 90 minutes. So you obviously need a good conditioning base to be able to perform that. Okay, so how do we sort of put all that together? Now, as I say, you haven't really got the luxury of saying, right, I'm just going to do strength training for a couple blocks and I can look at conditioning. It needs to be concurrent. It needs to be all worked in together. So, it can be tricky. If we're looking at a sport like American football, for example, I think the average play in the NFL was averaged out at being just under 4 seconds a play. So we're talking very, very short periods of time, we've got an offense, we've got a defense, we've got special teams. So there's a lot of rotation. The plays are very, very short. So those guys can be very, very specialist in their job role. Okay, some players will never touch the ball in their life because they're working, in a certain area of defense. Offensive players may never need to tackle in their whole life. So we can be a little bit more specific. Okay, so for example, your defensive lineman or offensive lineman, for example, how important is a big aerobic base? Not massively. You'd be almost talking like a powerlifter. Like you'd want to have a decent one so that you can do enough volume in the weight room. You can last the length of the game without getting tired, but the plays are very, very short. So we can put a massive emphasis into high-end strength and power. Now, if we're talking about a wide receiver, for example, then we need to be strong and powerful, but we need to be extremely fast as well. So again, your goals are just adjusting slightly, and therefore the amount of total time you're spending in each area is just going to be a little bit different. So your speed merchants are going to be doing some like top end strength work, but not a huge amount. There's going to be a lot of speed and a lot of low end speed strength work. With a rugby player, for example, whatever position you are on the pitch, you're going to need a good aerobic base. Okay, you're going to need. There are some differences still. If you're a winger or a back or a forward, there's going to be differences in terms of how much you're running, how many high speed runs you're doing, etc., etc. But it is a little bit more rounded than, say, American football, which is more specialized in certain positions. So again, we just need to identify the goal, the position we're playing, and sort of take it from there, really. So for a rugby player, for example, an aerobic base is going to be a lot more important than it probably is for an American football player. So in terms of where to fit this into your sessions, again, this is where we've got to be really careful. We've probably just talked about there, like the fact that we haven't got a choice. We've got to do some conditioning work. So it's like, well, when do we do it, and what's the intensity that we do it at? So it's the same questions we had for the beginners, the intermediates, the powerlifters, the weightlifters. So again, without repeating ourselves, it's very, in terms of the intensity, it's a very similar thing. So for example, if I've got a game every Saturday, then doing a high intensity conditioning session on a Thursday, Friday is probably not going to be that advantageous. You could argue that in season, I'm not going to have to do any high intensity conditioning because I'll be doing that on a Tuesday night, a Thursday night, and then playing games on a Saturday. So with the rest of my time, I might look at just doing 3 strength sessions alongside that. Some of that will be maximal strength, some of that will be power, and some of that will be speed and speed strength focused. Okay, so it's a well-balanced program. But because I'm smashing myself 3 times a week down the club anyway, the amount of conditioning work I need to do on top of that might not be that much. Okay, so normally, depending on who you are, I would say no additional conditioning, or once a week some additional conditioning. So that might be, for example, a tempo run on a Monday, which is going to be low level aerobic work. So with that, we're not biting into that recovery time. It's low level enough that we're working blue zone, green zone, and the heart rates. We're not working too high intensity, so it's not going to have a knock-on effect on my session. So for example, I might do a tempo run on the Monday morning, and then the Monday evening I might do a weight session. Okay, so I'm just avoiding that high intensity work. Now, even in the off season, I might be building up an aerobic base through things like tempo running. As I come into pre-season, I might want to do some more mass type running. Okay, so maximal aerobic speed type stuff. That's a lot higher intensity, so I just need to be, again, careful that it's not having too much of a knock-on effect on my weights. But in the pre-season, that might be a good time to put in a 4-week block or a 6-week block of that, because I haven't got games to recover from. And then as the games start to come in, I'd want to drop off that. So if I am doing any additional conditioning outside of my games and my training, it probably wants to be on the lower end. Or if it is high intensity, then it's once a week, 30 minutes probably maximal, and that would be about right. So again, it's just finding the right level of conditioning. So as I say, like if you're looking at an overall plan, you might say off season, I'm going to build up a base with some, with some low level aerobic work, some tempo runs. Then I'm going to go into a high intensity block, and then I'm going to minimal dose that as I come into the season. I hope that's all making sense. And then in terms of when to do it, okay, then this carries over to your weight training as well. And what we like to do is use high days and low days for your training. So for example, if I'm doing, forget games for a second, if I'm training 4 times a week in the gym in the pre-season, I might have a high day, which is going to be my very heavy lifting, and I'm also going to try and do some sprint work with that as well. Okay, maybe sprint in the morning, weights in the evening, or sprints before the session into weights. So with that, I'm looking at very high intensity, but I'm looking at short periods and bursts of time. Then the next day I might have a low day, which might be lighter work. Maybe it's an upper body session. It's less strenuous on the nervous system. It might be accessory work if I'm doing full body. And then I'm doing some light aerobic work so that I can recover then for the next session. Maybe I have a day off the next day, or if I'm back in, maybe it's a high day. Okay. So you have your high day, low day, high day, low day. So, that might be, as I say, high day might be lower body, and low day might be upper body, or it might be both full body, but one's a harder session, one's a lighter session. And then in terms of my conditioning, I can do my high intensity stuff on the high day, and I can do my low intensity stuff on the low day, so that every day we're not fatiguing ourselves and going maximal with the effort and the amount of work that we're doing. So I hope that makes sense. So high day, shorter burst, higher intensity. Low day might be just as simple as getting my step count up. It might be a low level tempo run or watt bike, just working low level aerobic work, because that is cheap, easy aerobic work to get in that will assist in our recovery. Okay. So that's, important to consider. So yeah, I was going to go into something else, but I've forgotten. My mind's gone blank.
That's fine. Take a little while.
So
I think this gives a good overview for someone who does rugby or something, like not even the rugby, an India field sport. Like if you know that there's more to it than just doing the gym, like you probably understand, like if you play, I don't know, squash or you're rowing, like you understand that, like, okay, I got to do both works, both different trainings. So obviously you probably start thinking like, how do I manage this? So I think this has been a great overview, and I hope it makes sense. Yeah, you've actually just reminded me of what I was just going to round up. Perfect.
Actually something, which was like, as a rugby player, or a footballer, like or a football player, your maximal strength realistically is going to be affected. Like it is going to be affected. Now, if I, stop playing rugby and I'm not doing any conditioning work to improve that, I could push my maximal strength higher. I'm not saying I'd ever be a top level weightlifter or powerlifter, but I could certainly increase the numbers on my deadlift, on my squat, on my press. If you're in athletics, any field sport, track or field sport is exactly the same. So the maximal strength does get sacrificed a little bit. That's a reality. That's not to say that we shouldn't be pushing and trying to get stronger, but there are other, components. And the goal is, like I said, for a power lifter or weightlifter, the goal is, what is the maximal amount of weight I can put on the bar and complete in a competition for 1 rep. Yeah. So in a field sport, it's very, very different. In, someone who likes coming to the gym and they want to be strong, but they want to be fit as well, it's different. So we can improve the maximal strength, of course, but there are other goals and other factors to consider. So the realistic thing is, like, as you get more advanced and, like I said, you're producing more forces in the gym and out of the gym, in the sport that you're doing, then, as I said, like, we need to be very smart with the recovery. The maximal strength is going to be pushed, but, there is going to be a limitation, and we have to factor in the conditioning work around that. Now, the smarter we can be with the conditioning work, the less impact it's going to have on the strength on the strength training. So we can minimize the risks of losing strength by being smarter with when we do our conditioning work and the intensity in which we do it. And like I said, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is having higher days and lower days. Don't go like hard gym session on the Monday and then hard, conditioning session on the Tuesday and then hard on the Wednesday and hard on the Thursday. Two sessions a day can work nicely. Hard day on a Monday, easy day on a Tuesday, day off on a Wednesday, etc., etc. Something like that would work really well.
So if you find yourself in that category, which Mark was like explaining, basically you want your lift to be really high and lifting heavy, and you probably somewhere at that advanced level, you are right if you then avoiding the conditioning, because yes, you prioritizing your strength, which is fine and fair, but obviously then that would be just for the sake of hitting the lifts. Whereas like for an athlete, it's the performance as an overall effect. So yeah, I think many people neglect conditioning because they have that one goal. And that's probably completely fine if it's based on your goal. Because obviously, I think me and you, we both know people who don't do any conditioning as a fact of, well, do you know what, I'm just saving myself for the lift. So yeah, it pretty much works as we explained, that like the more advanced you are, the more like tax and effect it will have one to another.
Yep. So it's just about training smarter. It doesn't mean you don't have to do any. It's just being very, very smart with it. As you get more experience. If you're a beginner, enjoy the process, get your strength and your conditioning work in, and just find whatever you can do that is sustainable and you can be consistent with. And it's as simple as that, really. Fantastic. Okay, we'll round off there. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast, guys. And be sure to tune in next week. Hope you're enjoying all the podcasts we're doing. As I say, Spotify, YouTube, check us out. If there's any questions that you've got on any of the podcasts, then just shoot us over an email and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.